Have you noticed how the less available something is, the more people scramble to have it, even if they didn't want it in the first place? Imagine a man who appears rarely, yet when he does, the room falls silent. Not because of what he says, but because of what he withholds. You see, the common man floods the world with his presence. He is everywhere, available, predictable, forgettable. But the strategist, he starves the world of himself. He cloaks his value in absence. He makes scarcity his weapon. Like shadows that grow taller when the light retreats, his power expands in the emptiness he creates. The fewer glimpses you give, the more myths are born in your name. The less you are seen, the more they wonder, the more they fear, the more they crave. And in that hunger, you are no longer a man. You become a force, an unbreakable principle. The Machiavelli Principle. Machiavelli once hinted that giving too much makes you weak. Doesn't it feel odd that generosity, praised in everyday life, can actually destroy authority in politics or business? Power is never found in abundance. It is found in rarity. Diamonds, not stones, bend the will of kings. Gold, not dust, has commanded empires. The principle is simple. What is everywhere is valued nowhere. The tragedy of the common man is that he scatters himself like loose change across the table of the world. He is too easy to find, too willing to answer, too quick to appear. And because he is always there, he becomes invisible. Scarcity is the unseen throne from which true power rules. When you are rare, when you withhold, you create an aura heavier than any crown. Absence sharpens desire. Distance breeds speculation. Silence magnifies your name until it becomes legend. The wise learn that to be constantly present is to erode authority, but to withdraw strategically, deliberately, is to harden your value until others begin to bend around you. This is the first law of power. Never cheapen yourself through constant availability. Every glimpse, every word, every movement should feel earned, not expected. The man who understands this holds the key to influence. He does not chase attention. He forces the world to notice when he finally emerges. And when he does, he is unforgettable. Imagine if gold was as common as sand. Would it still symbolize wealth, or would we ignore it under our feet? Scarcity works because the human mind is wired to crave what it cannot easily have. This is not opinion. It is psychology. In Renaissance courts, Machiavelli observed that princes never allowed themselves to be seen too often. They appeared rarely, dressed in splendor, their silence heavier than the words of 10 advisors. The courtiers, denied constant access, obsessed over every gesture, every glance, every decision. Scarcity weaponizes curiosity. It creates a vacuum, and the mind cannot resist filling that void with meaning. Think of forbidden fruit. The less attainable it is, the sweeter it tastes. Scarcity transforms ordinary presence into mythic significance. Modern psychology confirms this. Scarcity increases perceived value, triggers fear of loss, and awakens primal desire. The Machiavelli Principle is not merely historical wisdom, it is cognitive truth. The strategist withholds not out of shyness, but out of precision. He understands that each denial, each absence, each calculated delay is a spark that ignites obsession. And when people obsess over you, you are no longer equal, you are elevated. They measure themselves by proximity to you. They bend without realizing it to your absence. Did you know luxury fashion houses sometimes burn unsold stock on purpose, just to keep perceived scarcity alive? That's power through destruction. Power cannot rest on vague ideas. It demands a framework, an architecture as precise as the foundation of a fortress. Scarcity, when properly shaped, is not simply a matter of being absent or unavailable. It is an instrument, a sharpened weapon crafted with the same care that a blacksmith gives to steel. It is not left to accident or whim, but constructed with discipline, strategy, and foresight. The formula does not emerge from randomness. It is deliberate, designed to mold perception itself. The first principle is presence, or rather, the artful limitation of it. Do not allow yourself to be consumed by the masses through constant appearances, for what is common quickly loses its edge. Withdrawal is not weakness, it is design. By vanishing often enough to leave a gap, you create a hunger in others, a vacuum that demands to be filled by your eventual return. The second element is control of access. Never permit yourself to be available at every call, for accessibility destroys value. People must struggle, wait, and earn their moments with you. When your time is framed as costly, when every second of your attention feels like currency, others will guard it with reverence. To them, you become not just a person, but a privilege. The third weapon is silence, used not as absence but as force. Words are ammunition, and like ammunition, they must not be wasted in idle fire. Speak rarely, but with precision. A single phrase spoken with intent, in a moment charged with expectation, can dominate minds longer than hours of rambling ever could. Silence breeds tension, and tension breeds weight. The fourth principle is the ritual of return. To reappear without thought is to squander momentum. To re-emerge with design is to command. Your clothes, thing, your posture, your timing. Each must whisper significance. You must arrive as though the moment itself was waiting for you. Finally, the fifth principle, mystery. Explanation dilutes. Full transparency is the death of allure. Let shadows remain, unanswered questions linger, and speculations swirl like smoke around your figure. Scarcity is not absence alone, it is engineered presence. Together, these 5 steps elevate you from ordinary to untouchable. What floods the world is forgotten. What appears rarely becomes immortal. Who's more powerful, someone surrounded by endless choices, or someone who limits others' choices to just 2? Tell me in comment section. To wield scarcity is not simply the act of withholding, it is the deliberate inversion of pursuit itself. The ordinary man lives in constant chase. He runs after attention, stretching himself thin to be noticed. He begs for love, compromising dignity for fleeting affection. He pleads for validation, shaping his actions to win approval. He grasps at respect, hoping others will grant him a fragment of recognition. But the strategist does not run. He stands firm, silent and absent, resisting the urge to throw himself forward. His restraint transforms the dynamic until others are forced into motion. What was once his burden becomes theirs. It is no longer he who seeks, but they who seek him. Desire does not emerge from abundance. Abundance suffocates interest. What is easily attained is easily discarded. True desire is sparked only by what seems distant, elusive, and just beyond grasp. The hunter does not crave the prey that lies still before him. He craves the one that flees, the one that makes him work, the one that forces him to sharpen his instincts. The same law governs human psychology. By limiting yourself, by making your presence costly, you create movement. You generate pursuit. In relationships, in business, in influence, the rare man becomes the gravitational center. He does not chase. He is orbited. Messages are sent to him, and he chooses which ones to ignore. Invitations are extended, and he decides which to decline. Words are anticipated, delayed, and hung upon. Every withheld response, every measured silence, builds pressure in the minds of others. They begin to bend unconsciously, shaping their schedules, their emotions, their expectations around him. This hunger transforms into dependence, and dependence is the purest form of power. Unpredictability sharpens this control. When others cannot foresee when you will appear, when you will speak, or when you will concede, they are left disarmed, vulnerable, and pliable. To chase is always to concede position. To be chased is always to rule. Scarcity, therefore, is not absence. It is domination, masked as distance. The world resists admitting this truth, but it is undeniable. People obsess over the one they cannot fully possess. The strategist understands, and thus he does not run. He waits, and the world moves to him. In psychology, there's a known bias where people value something more if it almost slips through their fingers. Ever felt a sudden urge to lock it down just as it became rare? Understand this with absolute clarity. Nothing erodes authority faster than constant availability. The illusion of power is sustained not by what people see too often, but by what they are denied. A king who lowers himself to mingle daily with peasants ceases to embody the majesty of kingship. He becomes a man among men, stripped of the aura that separates him. A lover who replies to every message the instant it is received ceases to inspire longing. He becomes routine, predictable, and forgettable. A leader who makes himself accessible at all hours, who answers every question and addresses every small concern, is no longer a leader at all. He is a servant, chained to the demands of others. What is common cannot be revered, and what is always available cannot be desired. Availability is the great enemy of mystery, and mystery is the oxygen of power. Without it, authority suffocates. Too much presence breeds not gratitude, but contempt. Too many words dull their impact until no one listens. Too much giving empties even the most precious of gifts of their value. Consider this. Even the gods are worshipped more for their silence than for their speech. Their distance creates awe, their invisibility creates reverence, and their silence forces mankind into endless speculation. This is why shrines are built to invisible deities, and why men kneel before empty altars. Mystery compels obedience in a way that constant presence never can. Do not mistake kindness for power, for generosity too freely given corrodes respect. Do not confuse constant presence with loyalty, for what lingers too long at hand becomes ordinary, even irritating. The human mind is wired to devalue what it can easily touch and to elevate what remains just out of reach. History is littered with examples of rulers, leaders, and figures of authority who collapsed not because they were weak, but because they allowed themselves to be overexposed. They became familiar, and familiarity is the slow poison of reverence. Your true worth is measured by the distance you enforce. Your authority is preserved by the boundaries you refuse to cross. Scarcity itself is the fence that keeps your value untouchable. Forget this law, and you will not see your influence stolen in one sudden blow, but dissolved slowly, drip by drip, in the quiet erosion of being taken for granted. Here's a paradox. Scarcity makes things desirable, but too much scarcity makes them irrelevant. How do you decide where the sweet spot is? Scarcity is not merely a tactic, it is a metamorphosis. To wield it is to undergo a transformation that elevates you beyond the ordinary patterns of human interaction. It is not simply the refusal to appear often, nor the withholding of words and gestures. It is the deliberate shaping of your image into something greater than your physical presence. Each act of restraint is not subtraction but addition, not diminishment but amplification. When you vanish, you do not become smaller. You become larger, for absence magnifies. The imagination fills the gaps left behind, and the mind paints you with colors more vivid than reality ever could. To withhold yourself is to become weightier, for people attribute significance to what they cannot easily access. History does not immortalize those who were constantly speaking, explaining, and revealing themselves. Legends endure because of their mystery, because of the silences that compelled others to wonder. Warriors who disappeared after their greatest victories became figures larger than life. Saints who spoke in fragments became immortalized as voices from another world. Leaders who surfaced only at the exact moment history demanded their presence became etched into memory as timeless symbols of power. Their absence itself became their monument, carved into the minds of generations. To withdraw, then, is not to step back, but to engrave yourself deeper. To retreat is not to diminish, but to multiply your presence in the imagination of others. The less you give, the more they construct around you. The silence you leave behind grows louder than any speech you could deliver. Scarcity is not the weakness of retreat. It is the highest demonstration of control. Control over your time, your energy, your worth, and, most importantly, the minds of those who seek you. This is the art of stepping away so that others cannot. It is the science of making your absence louder than the noisiest presence. Power of this kind does not need to roar. It waits, it hides, it starves the world of itself until the world kneels in desperate anticipation for its return. This is the deeper truth. Scarcity is not emptiness. Scarcity is empire. Before we continue deeper into these hidden levers of power, ask yourself, do you want to live as background noise or as legend? If your answer is legend, then stay with me and make sure you subscribe to Curiosity to Wisdom, where we strip away illusions and reveal the dark psychology that few dare to speak about. Power does not come to those who wait, it comes to those who understand. The principle of scarcity is not confined to palaces, councils, or battlefields. It seeps into the most intimate corners of human life. It governs the hidden mechanics of desire, shaping how we love, how we are loved, and how attraction itself is sustained. In matters of intimacy, availability is not affection, it is poison. The lover who is always present, always answering every call, always yielding to every demand, dissolves into routine. What once seemed exciting becomes expected. What once ignited passion becomes background noise. Desire cannot survive suffocation. It requires air, distance, and the ache of longing to breathe. The heart is not captivated by what clings, but by what escapes its grasp. Desire intensifies in proportion to the distance that separates. This is why forbidden love burns with such uncontrollable heat, why stolen glances linger longer than endless embraces, why the thrill of the chase intoxicates more deeply than the comfort of possession. Absence, when wielded with intention, is not neglect, but a catalyst. It multiplies passion rather than diminishing it. It is not cruelty, but recognition of how human psychology is wired, how the mind hungers most for what it cannot easily obtain. The strategist of scarcity does not smother, for smothering extinguishes flame. He withdraws, carefully, purposefully, leaving behind silence and space. And in that space, imagination begins its work. Doubts creep in, fantasies grow, hunger sharpens. The vacuum of absence becomes fertile ground for myths to take root. Those left waiting replay past words, magnify gestures, assign meanings that may not exist, all in an attempt to fill the emptiness. And when the scarce one finally reappears, the impact is not equal to the act, but multiplied. A delayed response feels monumental. A rare appearance feels like a gift. The effect is doubled, tripled, magnified beyond meres. Sure. Modern psychology labels this phenomenon the scarcity effect. Poets call it longing. But beneath the language lies one truth. What is too available becomes forgettable, replaceable. What is rare, withheld, and distant becomes irreplaceable, even sacred. Power in relationships is not secured by giving everything, but by giving almost nothing, then making that nothing priceless. Napoleon controlled loyalty by limiting honors and medals. Imagine how different it would feel if everyone deserved a ribbon. Would his soldiers still march into fire? True leaders understand that power is not built by saturation, but by scarcity. Authority does not grow from endless speeches, daily appearances, or constant accessibility. Instead, it thrives on carefully chosen moments that carry the weight of legend. The leader who appears too often becomes predictable, his presence dissolving into routine. But the one who withholds himself, who selects his moments with surgical precision, transforms even the smallest act into an event. Scarcity, when applied to leadership, multiplies influence. It turns words into commandments, gestures into symbols, and appearances into history. Consider the great commanders who reveal themselves to their soldiers only at pivotal times. A single unexpected appearance could ignite eruptions of loyalty strong enough to drive men into battle without hesitation. Their absence in ordinary times made their sudden presence extraordinary. Modern leaders echo this same law. A CEO who refrains from constant exposure does not weaken his connection to shareholders, he strengthens it. When he finally speaks, every word is dissected, weighed, and treated as prophecy. His silence builds suspense. His scarcity manufactures demand. Even in the spiritual realm, distance works the same. Religious figures who cloak themselves in ritual, silence, and limited appearances cultivate devotion that burns across centuries. Their scarcity becomes holiness. Their absence becomes sacred. Scarcity in leadership creates weight. Every word resonates because it is rare. Every decision feels inevitable, almost fated, because it was delayed until the exact moment of necessity. Followers do not crave leaders who are constantly among them. They crave leaders who star, and above them, untouchable, elevated, beyond reach. The leader who is everywhere loses majesty. The leader who is scarce becomes myth. Scarcity is not neglect. It is elevation. It does not weaken the bond between leader and follower. It amplifies it. The leader who is seldom seen is not abandoned, but revered. His distance does not alienate, but enthrones. This is the hidden architecture of influence. Scarcity does not make you less. It makes you infinite. Applied with precision, it ensures you are never just another participant in the crowd. You become the axis around which the entire crowd revolves. Did you know tech companies deliberately release fewer units at launch than demand requires? People line up not because they need the device, but because they don't want to be the last without it. In the end, the great principle of scarcity reveals itself as a paradox. By offering less, you give more. By withdrawing, you do not surrender ground, you dominate it. By being rare, you do not fade, you become eternal. Power does not belong to the man who scatters himself across every stage, in every conversation, at every table. Such a man drowns in the noise of his own abundance, his voice blending with the endless chatter of the ordinary. History forgets those who flood the world with their presence, for what is constant becomes invisible. The eternal names are reserved for those who understood the discipline of withholding, those who rationed their words, their time, their very essence, until every fragment carried the weight of prophecy. Silence has carved deeper monuments than speeches. Distance has ignited more devotion than constant presence. A single withheld word can shape movements more than 1,000 declarations. A single absence can change the course of empires more than 1,000 appearances. This is why some figures become immortal, not because they gave themselves freely, but because they gave themselves sparingly. Scarcity is not a tactic to be used casually. It is the very architecture upon which legends are built. It is why the death of a single ruler can shatter an empire, why the silence of a leader can ignite a revolution, why even in the modern world, saturated with voices screaming for attention, the one who withholds commands the stage effortlessly. To embrace scarcity is not to vanish but to ascend. It is not disappearance, but elevation. By refusing to be common, you transform into something unbreakable, untouchable, unforgettable. The strategist, who lives by this law, knows that presence is not about quantity, but about quality, multiplied by rarity. One word, one act, one carefully chosen appearance outweighs 100 careless ones. That is how myths are formed. That is how eternity is secured. So the question remains, burning sharper than ever. Will you scatter yourself like dust, everywhere, forgotten, trampled underfoot? Or will you forge yourself into diamond, rare, indestructible, and worshipped across time? The choice is yours, but the law is eternal. Scarcity is empire. Scarcity is immortality.